One of the biggest ongoing wars in the world has nothing to do with boots on the ground, but technology in space. Jeff Lee is a renowned cybersecurity expert. He used to man the front lines of cybersecurity for the state of California. He, more than anyone, knows how this could all endanger America's infrastructure, communications, and personal security. From Ballard Studios with my co-host Anthony Williams, it's 13th and Park.
You and I can differ, but that doesn't mean you and I cannot be friends.
That often is missing in politics.
We went from North Korea to M&M. That's a lot, man.
Aliens could have invaded and nothing would surprise me at this point.
It's a nightmare.
Those are the facts.
We have to solve everything.
What's in this tea?
Well, Anthony, there's a lot in the news today about TikTok.
Yep.
The Supreme Court has handed down their final assessment, their final verdict, unanimously, by the way, in upholding the ban. President Trump is going to address that after taking office. I think that is still yet to be decided one way or the other. But it does raise a bigger issue that Americans are dealing with beyond security and privacy of data, right? It's cybersecurity. And so, on your recommendation, we bring in Jeff Lee. Jeff, welcome to the show. I'm going to have Anthony introduce you. We can't wait to hear your insights about, hopefully, what's going to make all of us feel a little bit more secure. Anthony, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. And Jeff, good to see you, man. You spent more than a decade advising, I know, policymakers, but also Fortune 100 companies dealing with cybersecurity issues and created mechanisms for companies to protect themselves and work with companies that do that. You've got an op-ed out where you kind of telegraph and talk about what the cybersecurity challenges are for the new incoming administration. So good to have you, Jeff, and look forward to hearing your perspective, especially given everything that's going on.
Well, thank you for having me, and flattery will get you everywhere there, Anthony. So I'm looking forward to our conversation today. Unfortunately, cybersecurity is a booming business. I would much rather be able to work on other issues, but the challenges we're seeing globally in the digital space, it's growing exponentially. And when you think about the tools that are being deployed by state actors and others, there's both challenges and opportunities that come with that. So I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Well, you've written about in this op-ed, and a lot's been reported on recently about what's called the Salt Typhoon and the Volt Typhoon. The Salt Typhoon, where the People's Republic of China was behind an effort to kind of infect telecommunications in this country. And the Volt Typhoon was all about going after untoward influence and surveillance on our nation's critical infrastructure. How concerned should Americans be about these kinds of things, and assuming that these are not the only two things going on out there that directly threaten our ability to sleep at night?
I think you highlighted it really well. I mean, both Volt and Salt Typhoon are only the ones we know of. That's not including all the other latent campaigns that the People's Republic of China have in the works. And also, this is not just a one country effort. There are multiple countries that have multiple campaigns trying to impact, infect, and take advantage of vulnerabilities in our critical infrastructure and in our way of life, I would say, broadly speaking. So when you're talking about the PRC making efforts to utilize the entire telecom system, that is alarming. And I think the Trump administration has a tremendous opportunity to be able to let other countries know that such activities warrant deterrence and response. And I think in the first 100 days, incoming National Security Advisor Waltz has made that very clear, that the Trump administration is going to take more assertive digital activities against state-sponsored actors and also players that are going into our systems for financial motivation or for political reasons or other factors, things that are going against the Republic. The critical infrastructure in the United States impacts all of us. It isn't just a telecom issue. This is water, transportation, healthcare, your education systems and communities. These are all people. Unfortunately, we have a tremendous amount of work to do. We have a lot of legacy technology. We have a lack of understanding in terms of what good cyber hygiene looks like. And I think the Trump administration is going to be playing a more active role in trying to make deeper investments and closer political and public-private partnerships to ensure our resilience is up and that, our citizens can be safer.
So there was a lot of discussion from Kristi Noem, who was just before her confirmation committee, about this particular agency.
Right.
And she said that she believes there was a bit of mission creep here and that they aren't focused enough on certain things at the expense of others, the other things being election interference. That was
Mhm.
something that gets a lot of conversation going among Democrats and Republicans around the country, right? She wants them to go right back square into Central Mission 1 and to hunt out and to close down these threats, as opposed to trying to figure out how they play into election integrity, which is a whole nother kind of area that could take years and years to decipher, much less try to diffuse.
There's a lot of attention that's given to the election interference and political sort of motivations that people
Right.
have for doing this. But isn't it true that the lion's share of the attacks are both either to our critical infrastructure or communications or whatever the case? There's an economic motivation there. There's not necessarily a political motivation, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that the DHS Secretary Designate made it very clear that it wasn't just about mission creep. I think she was looking at it in terms of return to foundational work.
Okay.
And
Mhm.
safeguarding critical infrastructure and improving resilience has to be numero uno. And as you know, if you're trying to be everything to everybody, you're probably not doing everything great. So I think this is a major priority to really streamline and hone getting back to, for example, the cybersecurity, infrastructure and security agencies, sort of key mandates in this space and core objectives. Senate Dems and Republicans have made it very clear that they want to ensure that the structures in place are effective and they can be very targeted. There are other agencies and departments that are working on a number of topics in the cybersecurity space. The big piece here, the interplay, making sure that people are all on the same sheet of music and work together.
Yep.
So, for example, if there is an issue in the healthcare space, that the Health and Human Services Agency is working closely with DHS on these topics. And there's tremendous opportunities to do this smarter and be more effective rather than trying to be everything to everyone. And unfortunately, people take advantage of this sort of more buffet approach. Let's get back to more of the gourmet mission that these organizations are trying to get to.
You've also got a public affairs and communications background. If there's one thing that I think most people, most Americans, right, they understand the impact of cybersecurity and the threats that there are, but they don't really understand how it works. They don't really understand how restrictions on their daily lives in anticipation, like you think about TikTok, right? What's the challenge in terms of communicating what Americans should know about this, how we can better protect ourselves, but also just understanding some of the steps that need to be taken to ensure that we are protecting ourselves?
I think the points you all made on cybersecurity being a large economic motivator, that's completely true. I would say 4 out of 5 of incursions that I have seen in analysis largely are financially motivated. These are guys trying to break in for cash. So it's a lowest common denominator thing. So if your organization or your personal systems have vulnerabilities, that's like the equivalent of having your front door open with a mariachi band playing and saying, "Come on in." That's very
Right.
different than the house being locked and there's a scary dog outside.
Right.
Let's get rid of the technical voodoo of cybersecurity. This is a human enterprise at its core. This is about the basics. This is, in your personal life, making sure that you're taking care of your passwords, making sure you're updating your basic tools, making sure that, all the programs you're using in your everyday life are up to date. Now, when you're talking about more organizational system-wide, this gets back to the piece where, I advise companies and organizations to remind them that cybersecurity is not a CISO or CIO's role. This isn't everybody's problem. This is all across the C-suite and to the junior staff, because at the end of the day, resilience is a culture piece. It's if you're on, the subway or the metro, it's a see it, say it, right? It's everyone's
Right.
responsibility to be vigilant. And if people are not aware of their personal and professional responsibilities in that space, it makes it way more likely for something to happen. I will also just say one more piece of this as it relates to organizations. A lot of companies out there, a lot of mature companies in particular, they have thousands of people they work with, organizations. And in particular, I see, at least in terms of the partnerships, we are obviously supportive of trying to bring in small business into the fabric of our country in terms of the operations. And big companies play a key role in partnering with smaller organizations with unique expertise and abilities. Sometimes this unique expertise and abilities don't match the needed cybersecurity hygiene that's necessary. So what you are seeing in the Salt Typhoon experience you just highlighted, Adam, they're breaking in usually through partners, through vendors, through subcontractors.
Right.
That's how they're getting in. And unfortunately, for these larger companies and organizations, when it gets in the press, they list them, even though they're doing all the right things. Understanding just with visibility where your vulnerabilities are, even if it's outside, again, if it's outside your house, that's one thing. But if you're connected in townhouses and there's vulnerabilities in the townhouses next to you, I think that's a problem too for your house. So just understanding that we need to be thinking less about the house and more about the neighborhood altogether. And I think there's opportunities for all of us as Americans to do that well and effectively.
Is this nation, as much as we now are concerned, even more so after this conversation about our own security, are we still maybe the best at doing cybersecurity out there? And even with that sense of pounding our chest, are we actually gaining ground against an issue that seems to be growing by the day?
Yeah, well, so I guess question one, yes, the United States are the best in the world at this. But as you know, just because you're the best doesn't mean you don't get sucker punched from time to time.
Right.
So you can be the best fighters and warriors. You can still take a hit or two. And the challenge that we have is for each of these incursions that happen, that affects real people, that affects your kids' data, that affects the intellectual property of hard-earned American research and innovation. So you can be the best and still take the L's. And that's part of the challenge here. You have to be ever vigilant at achieving the highest standards possible. The reality, Adam, is it only takes one person to fall on the job that day. It only takes one person to click on something. You can have everyone be perfect. You just need one, right? So if you've got scorers trying to shoot on you, you save 9 balls. That's great. The 10th goes in. That's the one people remember. That's the challenge. The level of sophistication that you're seeing from other state actors, it's growing exponentially. And it's not to alarm folks, but it's just to be brutally honest, that the financial gains from ransomware that are happening aren't just going to lining the pockets of the bad guys. They're also using this money to improve and expand their abilities, capacities, and talent pool.
Yeah.
So this is one of those, you invested, we were talking earlier, like, people are policy. Well, if you're investing in the right tools, they're able to have the right operations to be successful. One more piece, I would say, given, the buzzword of the year will definitely be in the artificial intelligence space with AI. The AI safety and security tools that are at play, both offense and defense, key questions here going forward. So when we talk about this race on AI, how is that going to be utilized here for both the protection of our great country, but also our ability to be able to fight off against other adversaries? This is a key question here going forward. And getting back to sort of the original tenor of this conversation here, we have to make investments. We have to be smart, and we can't be everything to everyone. We need to prioritize ruthlessly, and we need to work together here. This is a bipartisan issue here in Washington, and I have full confidence that we want to ensure that we can continue to have advancements against our adversaries, and I think there's tremendous opportunities to do so.
Well, I've had a real lesson here, a lesson in fear, personal fear,
right,
but also encouragement. I think that, or we're both hopeful, that the new administration is going to take this very, very seriously. The message that came out of Kristi Noem, I think, is we want to make sure what we're doing is working.
Yeah.
And that means going back to basics. Anthony, thank you for bringing Jeff
Absolutely.
into our life
Great
for
to
this
see you,
conversation. It was really helpful. And what you've really said to us today, Jeff, is we all have to think about this much more deeply and seriously and do our part in making sure we are keeping not only ourselves, but our friends, our neighbors, our families safe. Jeff, Godspeed.
Thank you for having me.